HoloNetAudio.com.
A long time ago.
You mean right now?
This is not logical.
You're listening to Dark Empire Radio, a podcast with news and discussion from the Star Wars and Star Trek fan communities. And more. Hey, hi, and welcome. I am Joe, the Brutal One. Glad to have you here. On this episode of Dark Empire Radio, I chat with a pair of old friends that have a well-liked Star Wars podcast that's been around for quite a while. And if you are one of the many that like their show, you certainly won't want to miss this interview. And then later on, another fanfiction audio replay from HoloNet Audio from a long time ago. And now a word from one of our sponsors.
Scott, we've been walking in this jungle for hours, and all you've been doing is texting.
Oh, it's no problem. With my new Vrint comlink, I can get a clear signal no matter where I am, and the new service plan gives me unlimited text.
General, we're running out of supplies.
With unlimited web service, I can access millions of locations where we can get takeout or delivery. Who wants to order from Dexter's?
But General, do we even know where the enemy is?
Sure. I just updated my service plan to include GPS tracking, so finding them is a snap. And with the new call-in circle, I get no additional charges whenever they call.
Execute Order 66.
General?
I know, right? If you had the Vrint mobile plan, we could have gotten that same call at no extra charge.
New Vrint Mobile. Unlimited mobile web, texting, and calling. When you really need it.
So, what is Order 66? Oh.
Don't be stuck using some old-fashioned brand communicator. Go with Vrint. If we want you to know, we will tell you.
Intriguing.
Vrint, a parody of the old Sprint mobile network that got taken over by T-Mobile a long time ago. I wonder if we should do a T-16 Skyhopper plan of some kind. Well, never mind.
We have a guest now. Don't keep the audience waiting.
Okay, sheesh. Vulcans. My guests this time have a Star Wars podcast that's been around since 2011, with well over 600 episodes under their belts. No small feat indeed, and I'm glad to talk to them once again after all this time. It has been way too long. They are Jason Hunt and Carl LeClaire of the Wampa's Lair podcast. How the heck are you guys?
Doing pretty good, Joe. Thanks for having us on.
Oh,
Joe, there is just such a delight to hear in your voice. You're so polished. It's wonderful.
I could say the same about you guys. I have read the comments of your podcast on iTunes and out there, and the overwhelming commentary, I think, is that you guys you sound so happy together, and you're so positive, and I dare say motivational. When I want to celebrate Star Wars, when I want to enjoy being a Star Wars fan, and I'm all by myself, I put you guys on, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're enjoying your fandom.
That means so much, Joe. Thank you. Yeah, I think I won't speak for you, Jason, because you're right here, so you can follow up however you see fit, my friend. But yeah, I think like Jason and I have been in this privileged place for so long, where we're not just doing. It's so funny. The whole podcast was born in the presence of you, good sir, Lord the Brutal One, my friend. All those years ago at Star Wars Fan Days out in Irving, Texas, and Jason was someone I met like that second night there, and I was just like, this kid is awesome, because we were kids back then, especially Jason. Whenever I look at those old photos, Jason looks like he's like 13, but you were in fact what, 20, Jason? 21?
22, yeah.
Yeah. But I loved talking Star Wars with Jason in that very truncated weekend, and I myself had just gotten into Star Wars podcasts, listening to them, and Jason at that point, you'd already done a couple of intros yourself, and I was just like, this is somebody I want to talk Star Wars with for a while. And, I don't think either one of us ever saw a particular end date, but I don't think, at least for me, I expected that I'd still be doing this week in, week out, nearly 15 years later. But I love talking Star Wars with Jason. I love doing the Star Wars things with Jason. We are fortunate enough at this point where we see each other, I would say, at least twice, sometimes 3 times a year. I'm living still in the Boston area. Jason's just outside Phoenix, so we're not exactly neighbors. But we make a point to spend at least a few times together in a year. And essentially, all we do, Joe, is we play Star Wars. Like we just, from Episode 1 Racer to pulling out old action figures and making new setups in either one of our places. I just love celebrating Star Wars with Jason, and I think we've been really adamant about approaching Star Wars from the avenues of the things that we love. We both admit that there are things in Star Wars that we don't love, but we don't want to waste our time talking about them. I mean, if anything, we'll talk about, like, if it's a new project and it didn't work for us, I think there's nothing wrong with healthy conversation around, oh, this thing didn't work for me, here's why. But we're not going to belabor the point, right? Like, I unfortunately, there's so many folks that take up online space that just want to spew things that they hate. And it's like, we're doing our damnedest to make sure we're that opposite narrative. So yeah, I'm glad that joyfulness and fun comes across, because that's exactly what we're doing. I just feel like every week I get to hang out with one of my best buds and talk about Star Wars. It's pretty great.
Best buds. Now you said you both met at Fan Days in 2011 specifically. Then you didn't know each other before then, is that right?
Correct. That is correct. Yeah, we both listened to similar podcasts. We both the Sarlacc Pit podcast is kind of the podcast that we had in common, and some of the people that were involved with that one and some others were going to be there. That was kind of how both Carl and I figured out that Fan Days was a thing, and I had friends who lived in the area, and so I was going to be able to stay with them for the weekend. And I lived in Texas at the time, so it was an easy trip for me. And then, of course, Carl came in from the Boston area, so it was one of those things where we were hanging out with the people that we listened to, and they were busy doing interviews with, I think, Stephen Stanton and some of the other celebrities that were there. So we were kind of just hanging off to the side and started talking, and ended up running around the convention for the rest of the weekend, looking at stuff and having a blast and getting to know each other. And it was great.
Oh, so while all the other podcasters were there trying to get celebrity interviews, you two found each other, and now look at you guys. Oh, wow. Talk about a bromance. You two met each other there at Fan Days. I was there. What am I? Chopped liver? I mean, I'm kidding you. It's amazing to hear about how you guys literally just met there and became fast friends. And now you're literally, it's like a bromance. You're still together doing things. It's like you're two kids that love Star Wars, and you just never let that go. I love that. I wish I made such a friend at a convention. But anyway, whatever. That's neither here nor there. Actually, yeah, that is really, really cool. Well, now everything is really starting to make sense, because the whole reason that I was there was because of my involvement, I guess you could call it that, with the Sarlacc Pit podcast. I did their intro narration, and I had interviewed Chris Hot Ice Planet Smith years and years before. Well, at that time, just a couple of years before, on the Dark Side Chats that I had on YouTube. It was a web series back in the early days, in 2010, 2009, 2008. YouTube videos were limited to 10 minutes each. And so I crammed everything I could into short 10-minute episodes, web series episodes on YouTube of basically the same thing that I'm doing right now, but in a YouTube format. And that's exploring Star Wars fandom. And I had I had interviewed Chris Smith then. So we all knew each other, and I believe they talked me into coming to Fan Days in Texas. Just because, they said, yeah, other Star Wars podcasters are going to be there. I think even the Forcecast was there at the time, which is now Rebel Force Radio. And we all had a blast. And lo and behold, yet another Star Wars podcast was formed. And probably, I would say, one of the preeminent Star Wars podcasts these days, just because you guys have a certain popularity, and certainly the way you present yourselves is one of the more entertaining recurring conversations out there. I just enjoy listening to you guys.
Thank you, Joe.
I don't know. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very, very kind. It was one of those things that you said that you were referencing a lot of the comments that we got on our iTunes and everything like that. And it is one of these things that Carl and I have deliberately talked about over the years, is trying to form and create a positive environment, a fun environment for people to just come and talk about Star Wars. And this is a hobby that Carl and I have. We don't make any money doing this podcast. We do it. It's doing the podcast is simply an excuse for Carl and I to get together every week and talk about Star Wars. If other people want to come in and join in the conversation and listen to us geek out, then fantastic. But yeah, it was one of those things back at the Fan Days era where you could almost count the Star Wars podcasts, on two hands and 2 feet. At least the Star Wars podcasts that were still regularly putting out episodes. And then it was only a couple of years later where it just exploded and everybody had a Star Wars podcast. So I remember Carl and I got in felt like we got it on a ground floor, and it's been wild to sort of watch the podcast world explode over the years in the way and kind of shift and change, and we're still doing our thing. It's the format hasn't changed all that much, but we're just still having fun. So
you guys used to do one thing that I haven't heard on your podcast lately, and I must confess, I have not listened to all 660 something episodes that you have out right now.
Neither have I.
I've listened, but I've listened to most of them, and I have to say, whatever happened to the, you guys used to have character confrontations. Whatever happened to that? You used to pit lightsaber battles or Han Solo versus Boba Fett, a hypothetical confrontation. Those things just don't happen anymore on your podcast. And I've got one for you guys. But whatever happened to those?
So we actually still do them on our social media. We no longer discuss them on air. I don't know that there was any rhyme or reason for taking them off. I think so. A number of years ago, I don't know if you remember this, Joe, StarWars.com was running they were doing March Madness on StarWars.com. They did this for a couple of years, right? Where it was essentially a bracket of Star Wars characters going toe to toe with one another. And you could vote on it every single day through the month of March. And it was a blast. And like I said, they did it for 2, maybe 3 years. So when they finished, Jason, when they started it, I arrogantly said to Jason, younger Carl was much more arrogant, and we were still working on it. But I was like, Jason, I feel like StarWars.com stole our idea. And it's like, it's not that original. But so Jason and I, after StarWars.com stopped running it, we started doing March Madness ourselves every year for, at least 3 or 4 years after. And we changed the format. Like, we started with just character matchups. Then we did one where we did like musical themes all through the month. Then we did like favorite scenes from the movies all through the month. Like, we tried having some fun with it, changing things up so everything didn't look the same. And I think it was when we started doing it in that format, because it was a lot of work running that every day in the month of March, that we just kind of hit pause on it on the regular show. And we never really brought it back on air until, I don't know, maybe a year ago. Maybe you can refresh my memory better, Jason, but like, I was just like, I miss doing these. Like, let's, I kind of just left Facebook a couple of years back gave it up during Lent one year, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going back. But I still play with Instagram and all. And, well, that's pretty much it. So I started putting them back on Instagram, and Jason's been just recently putting them up on our YouTube and doing some fun little voices here and there because Jason's good at that. So they're still there, Joe. We just don't discuss them on air, but it's nice to hear that you enjoyed them as much as you did, and perhaps it's time to bring them back on air because folks are definitely weighing in. But we just sometimes we'll reference it on air, but we don't like. I know what you're referring to, Joe, is obviously at the beginning of each episode for years we would say, you know, last week we had Han Solo versus Cassian Andor. You know, the folks said this, and then Jason and I would briefly weigh in. Yeah, it's been a minute since we've done it, and there was no particular reason for getting rid of it. But Joe, can I just, because we're being nostalgic here, can I tell you where that idea even came from when we started doing it all those years ago?
Oh, by all means, yes.
Do you remember the PlayStation game Masters of Terrakasi?
Yes, I do.
I didn't own the game because I never had a PlayStation when it came out, but I loved playing it at my cousin's. And I loved this idea of like Luke Skywalker fighting Han Solo or and one time I was watching Attack of the Clones because I had just met Jason, and Jason told me that it was his nearly favorite movie. Return of the Jedi just edged it out. And that's why I just immediately like fell in love with Jason as a Star Wars fan. I'm like, yes, I've never met a Star Wars fan who loves Attack of the Clones this much. You're awesome. And it was shortly after we started the show, and I was watching Attack of the Clones one night, and that scene with Mace Windu's, this party's over, facing down Count Dooku. I always wanted to know, all right, if those two dueled right now, who would win? And from that question where I asked Jason, and we just talked about it as friends, I was like, I think this would make a cool thing I said to Jason, I said, what if we did an episode about just random matchups? And Jason one-upped it by saying, what if we made that a segment on the show each week? And I was like, way better idea. Let's do that.
See, Carl is the idea engine behind a lot of this stuff. Like Carl just sprouts ideas faster than I can. And so my job with a lot of these things, Carl comes in and we have a lot of ideas. And the nice thing is when we do get together, we'll sort of start planning out a bunch of our episodes in advance. So nowadays, which we didn't used to do. But so nowadays that makes it a lot easier. But Carl has been a great ideas person for idea topics, or episode topics and segments and things like that. And then it's been fun working with that and tweaking things and figuring them out over the years. And sometimes it's just one of those things where you've been going on for so long. It's like, all right, let's switch things up just to make things fresh again. And I think at one point, after one of these March Madness things that we had done, we were just tired because it had been a busy March for us outside of the podcast and on the podcast. And we're just like, all right, we're going to take a break from these matchups. And I think we had kind of run out of characters at that point. It felt like that for a minute, and it was getting harder and harder to come up with matchups. So we're like, all right, we're going to let that go for a while. And it was about a year or two ago that we started doing Monday matchups on our social media, Instagram and Facebook and now YouTube. So that's been fun to work back in. And but yeah, Joe, you said that you had a matchup for us, though. I'm curious to hear
I do.
What you've got.
Yeah, I miss being able to record myself and email you guys an MP3 of my commentary about your matchups, because you used to let the listeners do that. You'd read their comments and their answers, and you'd play the voicemails from anybody that sent you guys something. Mm-hmm. And I kind of miss sending you guys a dark side themed response to your matchups there. And I always kind of did it in my Lord Bruticus voice. And as we were talking about before we started recording, that name no longer has any meaning for me. I still go by the brutal one, but Lord Bruticus, well, that's the identity of someone that I no longer associate with. But that's okay. That's all right. I think being Star Wars, we're allowed to have multiple personality disorder. That's okay. I have a matchup for you guys, and I'm very curious. And if I know you guys already, and I do, you'll probably steal my answer from me. But that's okay, That's all right. 3PO versus Grievous. Who would win? I'm very curious what your answer might be.
Ooh.
Well, if we're talking pure combat, it's got to be Grievous, but that assumes the fact that C-3PO doesn't talk Grievous to death first.
You took my answer. That's it. I said I knew you guys, and you did. Yes, 3PO would talk him to death. That's it. Yeah, you're right.
He would go through every single... he's fluent in 6 million forms of communication, and Grievous would hear each one.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh my goodness, that is fantastic. I love that.
See, so I think if you guys dig down deeply, and I don't think you have to dig very far, there are all kinds of potential matches that you could come up with. And I'm not a big social media guy. I am on Facebook, but ever so not very often, because I have a Facebook page and I do update it and I do check Facebook here and there. But my presence on social media is almost non-existent. So I suppose then I have suffered because you've been putting these matches on social media. Well, for my sake, put it back on your show, okay? Please. Okay. Anyway,
well, having a big social media presence isn't necessarily a bad thing. So I don't blame you for that.
Yeah. I agree. It's actually been very peaceful. Well, let's face it. Let's talk about the state of Star Wars and its fandom for a little bit. You guys obviously are both fans of the wars. I listen to your show, and I sometimes wonder if there isn't anything about the wars that you don't like. Now, is that the case? Are you both fans of everything out there? Or is there something lacking in the wars lately that really sizzles your circuits, so to speak?
Now... are you just talking like story content wise or within the Star Wars fan community?
Any of it. Is there anything in the Star Wars property that just gets your goat?
There are certainly new stories that have not been my favorite, but I don't dislike anything. In the sense of like, oh my gosh, I hate this. I would never watch it again. There's never really been anything like that because I feel that there's always something. So I'll let Jason obviously answer in his own terminology, but something we've shared on the show is like the Andor show is neither one of our favorite Star Wars entries. And it's not because we don't think Andor is a fantastic show, because it is. It is debatably the most intelligently written Star Wars ever. I would argue from a kind of objective storytelling aspect, but our favorite elements of Star Wars are the kind of fantastical, mystical side. And obviously that is completely divorced from Andor. So, it's not a show that I would frequent, but I also love that they've branched out and tried something completely different. I think for me, the only thing that sizzles my circuits in the Star Wars community is gatekeepers. Like, I think as the Star Wars fandom has expanded, especially in light of the Disney era, I don't have a lot of patience for anyone who says you're not welcome in the fandom that just doesn't sit right with me. At the end of the day, Star Wars is a moral tale of goodness, compassion, and acceptance. And if you can't live those models out in your Star Wars fandom, I just wonder what you learned from Star Wars, if anything. So yeah, that's the thing that forever fries my circuits. But like Jason, and sounds like you as well, Joe, like I don't engage in social media in the same way myself. Like I enjoy making fun content for Instagram because I like taking pictures. I always say to friends, I really only use Instagram because it's a picture book. I don't need to get onto Facebook anymore and hear diatribes from people. But I like making just fun photos. I like going through like old elements of my collection to share pictures of and things like that. But yeah, I've never liked gatekeeping in Star Wars. I think it's become a little more pronounced in the last decade. It's not unique to Star Wars. Every fandom has gatekeeping. Religions have gatekeeping. Politics have gatekeeping. It's part of the human condition, unfortunately. But for me, I always just say the more the merrier. There are definitely Star Wars fans who love things in Star Wars that aren't my favorite. They're probably not going to be the people I talk a lot of Star Wars with, but I have no issue with them having space in fandom, and they should be welcomed within fandom. So I think that for me, it's like there's no stories that I find like reprehensible. The only thing I find reprehensible is there's a meanness in the fandom that I wish could be purged.
Bingo. I am glad someone else said it. Yes, if there's one thing that is absolutely abhorrent in Star Wars, it's not the property itself, although we all have some things that we may not be completely in agreement about. But yes, it's the fan community, and it's like that both in the Star Wars fandom and Star Trek fandom. And you have to ask yourself, how much of a fan are you really when you go out there and you criticize other fans because of their fandom? It's not very fan-like of you. Now, you mentioned something that gatekeeping is a very interesting response. And I kind of thought then that you must not own a holocron, because when you activate a holocron, what is the first thing that appears? The holocron gatekeeper. So maybe that's the one exception. Right?
Yes, they're the exception.
Every rule has an exception, I guess. Yeah. Well, the fan community, which I need not explain, is all of us, at least the ones that don't go out and criticize other fans, I suppose. Would you say, then, that the rather underwhelming performances of Star Wars at the box office, with its most recent outings, the Mandalorian, the Solo movie, that fandom for the wars may have diminished somewhat, not unlike the Jedi with its connection to the Force and the prequel movies, according to Mace Windu, or are we always there like old luggage?
Oh, man. I feel like the Solo movie was sort of a weird anomaly, because I feel like it was both Carl and I have said that we really enjoyed it, and it's a very fun movie. My biggest gripe with the whole thing around Solo is that Disney decided to release it between I can't remember if it was Avengers Endgame and Justice League, or it was one of the big later Avengers movies in the original first run of Marvel. It was like between that and Justice League, and it was, that was supposed to be the big box office fight that year, was Marvel versus DC, and they squeezed Solo in the middle of it. For the first time that Disney moved a Star Wars movie to May rather than December. So it was kind of a weird marketing decision that I don't think did Solo any favors. As far as Mandalorian and Grogu,
that one just needed more marketing, period.
It was one of those things where I think the fandom has changed a little bit in how they're consuming Star Wars. Star Wars is starting to become more of a TV or a series experience, and Mandalorian in particular obviously was the first series that Disney put out was for Star Wars, live action series, I should say, and moving it to the big screen. I feel like, moving something that is very clearly, when you watch the movie, essentially an episode arc of a series of episodes from the show that's been tweaked into a movie. And you could feel that when you were watching it. I think people would have been like, well, why wasn't this just made into season 4 rather than squeezed into a movie? So I feel like I don't know if it's, we're all always there, but it is one of those figured out what they want Star Wars to be anymore, because it's been changing. A lot of it is, like I said, has been moving into live action series and things like that. And it's like, well, it was always a movie series, so we need to put something back on the movie screen. And they kind of took a series and made it a movie rather than just making a new movie. I think the big question will really be, how does Starfighter do next year? Because that's a project that was made as a movie from the get-go. So I don't know.
I agree. It had the content that was in The Mandalorian been put towards a season 4, and then use some of the main characters, spend a little money if you're going to make a movie, for crying out loud, put Bo-Katan in there, put all these other characters in there, even Ahsoka, maybe even a CGI Luke. Okay. Put everything that we loved about the Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett series, because let's face it, they both go together, and put that into an actual movie. I think that would have done a lot better than what we got with The Mandalorian. But yes, do you guys think Disney has its work cut out for itself then with the upcoming Starfighter movie?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. I've always wanted a Starfighter themed movie, a Rogue Squadron movie. That when Patty Jenkins was supposed to be doing a Rogue Squadron movie, I was very excited for that. I've always wanted to have an X-Wing movie of sorts. So I think this is going to be the closest we're going to get to that right now. So I'm very excited about it. And I'm just interested to see how they're going to play this out from the marketing standpoint and everything like that. So it's probably a big hill because the other aspect to all of this is, movies aren't nearly as big as they were in general back when Star Wars was in its prime. When George Lucas was putting out the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, movies back then were the big cultural touchstones. Now it's TV series,
Well, and you also had COVID thrown in 2020 where no one could go to the movies for about a year, right? I think that changed. Yeah.
And that was the big monkey wrench in the machinery.
It changed the entertainment industry in a very big way.
Go ahead.
I'm excited for Starfighter because it's something completely divorced from everything that's come before. Mandalorian and Grogu really was not a good movie to me. And so earlier I was saying, there's not a whole lot in Star Wars I don't like. And I would say I don't hate the Mandalorian and Grogu. I don't know that I ever want to or need to watch it again. I felt that it's a really good TV show. And it's clear, I think Disney is just such a corporate machine. And ever since George sold it, right, back in 2012, excuse me, I've always been worried because, Lucasfilm, of course, is a corporation, but it had, I don't know, I know I continue to wear these George Lucas blinders where he's just the benevolent overlord of his company. But he really did seem like a benevolent, lovely man, still does. And, I think Disney, we've gotten so many good Star Wars stories and we've gotten so many Star Wars stories full stop, right? I think that was the one thing that George wanted them to do when he was kind of done with this property. He knew that there was still a cultural craving for it, but he didn't have the energy nor the desire anymore to put out stuff. So he gave it to a company that he knew would. And I think Disney has just continued to roll things out. And, the incessantness of it is it's still just sometimes baffles me. And I think it in a lot of ways it's reshaped a lot of people's fandom because, I think the way we consume Star Wars now is very different from when George had it. And it was you only got a movie every 3 years. And then there was big breaks between them and you might get a couple novels in a year. Now it's every form of media there's always something. And I think that's why Jason and I have kind of just adopted the model of hey, it's a huge buffet and there's going to be things we love at this buffet and there's going to be things that we probably won't get seconds of, and that's okay too. I think Mandalorian and Grogu would have been a fine season 4, and the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, which was originally supposed to be a movie, I think would have worked a lot better as a movie than as a TV series. So it's those are two things where it's you swapped those. I think you did them wrong. But I'm really excited for Starfighter because I think it has that element of Jason's been pining for an X-Wing story since probably 1995 when that series came out in by Michael Stackpole. And I think it's neat because it's we also have been told that it has nothing to do with the Skywalker saga. Now, for me, the Skywalker saga is the gospel of Star Wars stories. Everything else, they can be Paul's letters, they can be added content, church letters from times spent down. But, I think having things divorced from that main storyline, it takes a weight off things too. I think, so I'll mention another, property Disney owns, which is Marvel. I haven't cared about Marvel really since WandaVision. And I loved WandaVision. WandaVision actually made me a Marvel fan. And then I went back and did everything up through Endgame. I'm man, Endgame was just such a phenomenal movie, but man, has it been a hot mess since, in my opinion. And like, I think part of the problem is there's trying to connect everything can sometimes bite you in the butt. And I think Starfighter is something I'm excited about because it doesn't have to connect to anything. And I know when they made Mandalorian and Grogu, I know Jon Favreau was very adamant of like, oh, I don't want people to have to have seen the show to be able to go enjoy this with their family. And it's very true when you go to that movie. We have enough of a cultural understanding of like, oh, we know who Grogu is and we know who Mandalorian is. That's all you needed to know going into that movie. But there is also a really rich history in that story that I thought they just kind of left out of the movie. And I think with something like Starfighter, you get to tell a story that has nothing to do with any big elements. It's one of my favorite scenes in Spider-Man Homecoming is at the end of the movie when Tony Stark's like, all right, we got you. The press is outside. They're ready to welcome you into the Avengers. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I was like, yes, that's what I want a Marvel movie to be. It doesn't have to all be against Thanos and some multiverse. It can just be a single story. And I think Starfighter is kind of promising that of like, yeah, this is going to be its own isolated story. And I think that's exciting to me.
Well, as a Spider-Man fan, I think you're going to be pleased with the new Spider-Man movie if you haven't seen it. I saw it last night. And if you're looking for a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, well, that you're going to like this movie. As fans, what is the one thing, just pick one thing, that you would like to see the mouse? And maybe we're doing a bit of rodent control here. What would you like to see Disney do with Star Wars next?
Oh, man.
I know.
Well, go for it. I'll let you kick that off, Carl, then I'll pick it up.
Since Disney has taken over, what I would want more than anything is a Clone Wars style show, but with Han, Luke, and Leia post Return of the Jedi. I don't want just adaptations of old Legends books. I don't want that at all. Because they were their own thing, and I think let them be what they were. Let them inhabit your fandom as something special and precious. But I love Clone Wars. It's such a good show. And it did so much to enhance, I think, at least for me, my love of the prequels and my love of the prequel characters. And I think, for a lot of fans that were jarred by the sequel trilogy, I think what was so jarring is that when we leave our heroes at the end of Return of the Jedi, everything is so great and wonderful. And then when we meet them again, they're just kind of these really broken characters. And hey, listen, I get it. As you get older, sometimes life doesn't go your way and it can make for some rough go. But I think to go to that so abruptly, it was hard for a lot of fans and still hard for a lot of fans. And I think getting a series where we just get to see our big three together in some way would be a lot of fun. And I think we all know Mark Hamill would love to come back and do some voice work. I mean, he loves voice acting. You will not get Harrison Ford. But that's the thing I want more than anything is, and bring in new characters like the Clone Wars series did. It doesn't have to just be Han, Luke, Leia, and Chewbacca, but I would love an animated style show like that. That's for me. But yeah, Jason, I also want to know what you would pick, Joe.
Yeah. For me, one project that I think would be really, really fun that I've mentioned a few times at panels at Phoenix Comic-Con a few times is that I would like a movie that's set back about 400 years before the Phantom Menace, where Yoda is out on a mission to deal with some sort of pirate activity, and he has to team up with Maz Kanata. And the two of them have to take down a pirate gang in order to save, I don't know, a planet or a space station or something out there. And I just think it would be hilarious because your two main characters would be less than 3 feet tall. So yes, that's a movie that I would love to see. I would like to continue to see things develop, though. I think Dave Filoni has some good ideas, and I'd like to see what his plans are moving forward now that he's the one in the driver's seat. So, of course, it takes a few years for projects to make it to us once they've been started. So we'll see how that unfolds in the next coming years. So, but yeah, Joe,
Just,
it does
Jason, they can take on the pirate king Gory and Kale. You know, the great grandfather of Gory and Shard.
There we go. There we go. Yes,
different kind of roughage.
Yes.
You guys must be Legends fans. Well, I have two responses to that question, which is ironic because these questions were all meant for you guys. But I would really love, first of all, Carl, you have a love affair with the Clone Wars, as do I. And because of that love affair, I grew to love Bad Batch very, very much. To me, Bad Batch was like the direct sequel to the Clone Wars. It just carried the torch, and it was left. I mean, it got kind of a good ending, but it was left so open at the end for the story to be continued. And I want to know what happens to Omega. I want to know what happens to the rest of Clone Force 99. Obviously, they're okay, but do they join the rebellion? What do they do? I mean, I would like to see more stories with the surviving Clone Force 99 members, and maybe they do join the rebellion. I think that would be great. My other thing, though, and this is, I don't want to cause any controversy, but if there's one thing that really sizzles my circuits, it goes all the way back to the Mouse's acquisition of Star Wars. I don't mind that the maker decided to sell Star Wars. We can forgive him for that. It was his. He could do what he wants with it. But what the Mouse has done with it, I have, my fandom is mixed. I have to say that although I still see myself as a Star Wars fan, it's not as much as I was so many years ago. I used to have autographs all over my walls. I used to have Star Wars books, expanded universe books, as far as the eye could see. I had bookshelves upon bookshelves of books. I have some of that still, but nowhere near as much as I did. And I think it's because just the way Star Wars has gone. I don't want to put it down. I still love a lot of what's out there. Some things I don't. I have long said, and this is what I wanted to have happen when the Mouse bought Star Wars. But of course, we can't always have what we want. It's wishful thinking. But I loved in Star Wars Legend, at the end of the novel Crucible, in the epilogue, if you just read the epilogue of Crucible, it left everything perfectly for Disney to pick up the storytelling right there. And I was hoping that Disney would have picked up events as they happened at the very end of Star Wars Crucible. The characters all go their own separate ways. Luke and his son are off doing this one thing. Han and Leia are doing this other thing over here. Lando, who sad to say is having some memory issues, is off doing his own little thing. And so it left conditions just right for the story to be picked up and told. And I would love, and Disney could still do this, they could do a non-canon anthology series picking the pieces up from that. They could call it Star Wars Legends, and they could tell the individual stories of what happened to Luke and his son, Ben Skywalker, not Ben Solo, and they could tell what happened to Han and Leia. They could talk about Lando. They could do just maybe an anthology series of maybe 5 or 6 episodes. It doesn't have to be a lot. But for us old expanded universe heads like me, I would love that.
I know you're not alone with that.
Well,
yeah, no, that would be so much.
I am glad to hear that because I have kept that. I have kept that bottled up for so long. I'm glad to hear that.
I love Legends, and that's something as well. Jason and I have, I don't know, maybe only once or twice a year, but we'll pick up an old Legends book to just either reread or sometimes read for the first time and talk about it on the show. It's always a good time. So yeah. I continue to really enjoy a lot of Star Wars novels. There have been some duds, but yeah. And the nice thing about Legends is they're always there. And I have found, especially now that they're doing the new Essential Legends collections, and many of them then will get fully unabridged audiobooks. They're really fun things to just put on when I'm like getting ready for bed at night, or if I'm on a long car ride, throwing on, the Thrawn trilogy or I, Jedi or something like that. It's really fun. Mark Thompson always does a great job. So I think, yeah,
he does.
I know you and I are not the same age, Joe, but like you, I had such a fond spot for Legends because I got into Star Wars when I was 9-10 years old. So that would have been 94 and 95. So in the heyday of the Legends era, and those stories were such an integral part of my early fandom and continue to be all these years later. It's yeah, I mean, they were the fun adventures that continued the story after Endor. And I'll forever love them for that reason. And I think it would be a lot of fun to see Disney do something with a Legend story in some way. And I think certain creatives have brought in Legends ideas. Obviously, right, we've gotten live action Thrawn, Rook. There are things from Legends. Corran Horn gets referenced in the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series. He doesn't get referenced. He's in it as a boy. So we get these little droplings, which is a really lovely thing for fans of Legends. But I think it could go a long way to get like, oh, here is the story of Ben Skywalker. Here is an animated retelling of the Jedi Academy trilogy, how Luke made his new Jedi training center on Yavin 4. Yeah, I'm with you, Joe. I think that would be a lot of fun. Take my money, Disney.
They already are.
That's true. That is true. Well, in that vein, actually, Joe, this is a weird pivot, but I want to make sure to make this point before we end our conversation. And not saying that we have to in the immediacy, but something I've loved in the many years of doing Wampa's Lair with Jason is we have been adamant really since day one that we wanted our podcast to be kind of an evergreen show. So we really we really do our best to come up with just fun topics that everyday Star Wars fans would want to have a conversation about. And we kind of run with that. Now, whenever the show started in 2011, George sold the company less than a year later after we started the show. But it was always like, well, we're not a news show because there's still a lot of Star Wars podcasts that just cover the news and what's coming out now. And hey, no shade at that at all. But we wanted to do something where we weren't beholden to like, oh, well, there's nothing really in the news this week. What are we going to talk about? It's like, no, we're just going to talk about fun stuff. And we do a lot of top fives. That's still kind of our favorite element to do on the show. To celebrate our 15-year anniversary coming up in October, we are essentially spending the month of October doing our top 15 moments to celebrate 15 years of Wampa's Lair. Top 15 moments across all of Star Wars. So movies, shows, books, you name it. We're going to that's how we're going to celebrate 15 years is like, we're just going to talk about what is it we love most about Star Wars still after all this time. And I think you'll appreciate this, Joe, because like you mentioned, Jason and I essentially, and sounds like you as well, Joe, we all found our ways to Star Wars Fan Days back in 2011 because of Sarlacc Pit. I was on the show with Matt and Chris many years ago. And after I finished recording with them, they're like, hey, we got this thing Fan Days coming up if you'd like to come. And I had just finished grad school, was making money for the first time in my life as a teacher. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. And so in kind of a really lovely and silly way, one of the things I have enjoyed most doing with Jason outside of the podcast is going on Star Wars adventures. And because neither of us have been to a celebration since 2019 in Chicago, and even in the interim, like we wanted to have Star Wars adventures that weren't just at Celebration, because Celebration is a lot of fun, but they're also a lot. It's just a lot. So we've gone to San Francisco a couple times in order to go to Lucasfilm headquarters. We drove by Skywalker Ranch. We're not connected enough to still get invited into any of those buildings beyond the front door, but you know what? We're going to take what we can get. And one of the most lovely things we ever did was we went out to the northern redwoods and went to a bunch of the filming locations for Endor from Return of the Jedi. So how we're going to celebrate 15 years in person is I'm going to fly back out to Arizona to spend a long weekend with Jason, and we're driving down to Yuma, Arizona to walk around the sand dunes where they filmed the Sarlacc pit. So we're super excited to go hopefully not get swallowed by a Sarlacc, because I hear that it's a slow digestion of over 1,000 years, which sounds inconvenient. Yeah, so like Jason and I were talking about like we should do something special for 15 years, and I was like, I'd love to do a filming location again, and there aren't as many obviously in the United States. Would love to do Tunisia, but that's a heavy lift.
Right.
And we have a friend, and Joe, I think you know our friend Jazz from Norway. I'm pretty sure you've met Jazz. Yes, you know him. Yeah,
Jazz Kopacek Raythor. Yes, he wrote one of the fanfics on Hollow Knight Audio. Yeah, he's a great guy.
And so Jazz was telling us about his time going to Yuma, and he's like, why don't you? He's like, I'm surprised you guys haven't gone there. Jason lives in Arizona. So I said to Jason, I was like, Jazz just sent me the actual GPS coordinates, like the latitude, longitude of exactly where they filmed the Sarlacc pit battle. We should do that. And that's what we're doing in just a couple months' time. I can't wait.
Yeah. Bringing it full circle. So.
Oh, wow. Well, bring some sunscreen and some sun shades, and you really need to have Matt and Chris with you, though, for that, I think. But even if not, what a great trip. Yeah, that would be amazing. I wish you a lot of luck. Guys, the Wampa's Lair has done a great service to our fan community simply by being what it is and having been so for so long. How long do you plan to keep going anyway?
Forever, man.
I mean, I will. Go ahead, Jason.
As long as we have time to do it, and as long as we feel like we still have something to say, I think it's, sometimes life just, we'll throw a curveball at you and things change. But as of right now, we don't have an end date in sight, but we never, like Carl said earlier in this conversation, we never expected to go this long. But we never expected, to have an end date either. So we're just kind of still going, and we'll just see how long this rides out and where life takes us and the Wampa's Lair along with it. So, yeah.
Well, absolutely. I think that even though your podcast is named after the home of a ferocious monster, nevertheless, it is an absolute joy to listen to. You guys have been an absolute joy to have on here. I hope to be able to have you back again sometime. Maybe I could contribute in some way to your wonderful show, and maybe we could collaborate somehow together.
I think that would be a great time as well, because I know, Joe, I know the reason you even reached out a few weeks ago was in light of the Dark Empire episode we did not too long ago, which of course is what inspired the name of the many iterations you've given to Dark Empire. I think it'd be a lot of fun to collaborate together and revisit Dark Empire in some way, whether it's just the first comic, or maybe we look at both the comics, but just have a conversation about them. And, who better than you?
Well, I'm particular. I love the comic, but I have a certain affinity for the radio drama.
It is.
I think it is a lot of fun. It has its moments. Billy D, of course, I think purposefully overacted compared to some of the other actors. But I think Billy D was what really made that radio drama. And, of course, all the other actors on there, too, were great. And not to mention Palpy on there, of course. And it's because of that radio drama that I was inspired to name this podcast Dark Empire Radio, that my past affiliation with the Dark Empire Costume Club. But somehow, if you guys ever revisit the Dark Empire radio drama specifically, yes, please call me. As we discovered in our last episode of DER, I wrote a fan prequel that leads right into the very opening scene of the Dark Empire, the comic and the radio drama. So that was a lot of fun to do. It was my love letter So I will sacrifice any amount of time to talk about Dark
Keep
Empire.
that in mind, and we'll put it in the hopper.
All right. Well, you guys are always a joy to talk to, and I wish you all the best with what you're doing, and please do keep at it. It has been a lot
Thank you
fun.
so much, Joe, for having us on. We really appreciate it, and thank you so much for the kind words. It means a lot.
Well, since our old friend Jazz got mentioned during that interview, here is a fanfic he wrote that I had fun narrating a long time ago. This is fan fiction only. Star Wars, Maximum Firepower, Maximum Efficiency, by Jazz Kopacek Rathor. Wookiees? I don't even speak Shriwook, replied Cram Rayetz to the Ark Captain who had just burst in, reporting an uprising in the Grand Army of the Republic Spaceport Control Room.
No, sir, but we believe we need someone with your specific skills in this situation.
The blank visor of his helmet betrayed nothing, yet through the Force, the trooper's concern was palpable. Cram Rayetz nodded curtly before following the trooper out the door and down an immaculately clean hallway.
The name's Captain Fordo,
the trooper called over his red-striped shoulder. As they ran down the hallway, dodging oncoming troopers, Fordo explained the situation. A group of unknown Wookiee workers had staged an uprising, taking Republic workers hostage, and were currently setting the central control room to blow, ostensibly in order to sabotage the ships currently in dry dock. Cram processed the information. It didn't make sense. Wookiees were often employed at the shipyard due to their sheer strength and technical expertise, either as manual labor or mechanics. However, by nature, they were massive, towering sentients and rare enough on Coruscant that the appearance of a few new Wookiees would cause a reaction. Why had none of the Vigilant Republic staff questioned their presence? Access to the control room required the highest levels of security clearance. How did they get in, Captain? Rayetz inquired.
Uncertain, sir,
the filtered voice replied.
Right now the focus is saving ships and personnel. We'll figure out the hows and whys later.
The priorities were straight, yet Cram was of the mind that understanding the problem would lead one to an optimum solution. They reached the central control room, where a squad of troopers were hunkered down, waiting for their captain. Their armor bore different markings, all red. Cram knew the choices of paint schemes reflected their desire for a sense of individuality in a sea of identical clones in identical armor. As the war had progressed, it was evident that these young men, who civilians often thought of as programmed and identical clones, showed the resilience and individuality of all sentient life, and a desire to express this in a visual fashion.
Sir,
said the trooper with one red arm.
They're still in there setting the place to blow. We've had no blaster fire and assume the hostages are still alive.
Hostages. Hence the need for a Jedi, Cram realized.
We usually go for maximum firepower, maximum efficiency, General,
Fordo explained.
Yet the results are not always minimum damage. With the presence of Republic hostages, we hoped you would be able to help minimize the casualties.
Cram nodded in understanding and closed his eyes. The troopers were silent as he immersed himself in the Force. As always, his point of focus was the weight of the two lightsabers hanging from his belt. One he had fashioned himself as a way to strengthen his connection to that mystical energy field that surrounded them all. The other had belonged to his Padawan, the Ektachi Is Suatla, whose life had been ended by a droideka in the early days of the war. The eddies and swirls of the Force surrounded him, and he felt his surroundings slow as he sank beneath its waves. His consciousness spread out and touched everything around him. He felt the low thrumming of ships reverberating through the floor. He felt the breathing of the 6 young men at his side. He felt their tension and determination, yet not a hint of fear, only concern for their brothers beside them and the well-being of the beings on the base. It always amazed him how these young men, who had no stakes in the war or its outcome, were the ones who valiantly fought and laid down their lives for the Republic. He felt their concern for the hostages on the other side of the door. The other side of the door. Cram lent his attention to the beings beyond the blast door. As always, when sensing Wookiees in the Force, he was struck by the dichotomy of their natures. At once, they felt feral and primitive, yet simultaneously they struck him as focused, advanced, and structured. Every one of the Wookiees in the control room was filled with rage. What had happened to them that they felt such rage toward the Republic, which had for so long had been a friend of Kashyyyk? He forced himself to remember that not all Wookiees felt the same. He searched in the Force for the others beyond the door, felt a few humans, a Zabrak female and a Duro, a species he did not recognize, as well as a Nemoidian, as if he needed another reminder of the dangers of generalizing based on species alone. Through the Force, he was able to pinpoint their approximate locations and was about to convey his findings to Fordo and his men when something struck him as odd. Prisoners would usually be grouped into one location where they could easily be overseen. Not only were these prisoners dispersed, but they were moving about. Cram sunk deeper into the Force, focusing now on the emotions of the hostages. Not a single feeling of fear. Only rage. The same rage that consumed the Wookiees. He smiled grimly to himself as he surfaced from the pool of the Force. The explanation and the solution were evident. "You may go in, Captain," he said quietly.
"And the hostages, sir?"
Fordo asked. "No friendlies present, Captain. There never were any hostages. You may fire at will." Minimum casualties, indeed, thought Cram Reyets to himself as the door exploded inward beside him, and the clones rushed through. The sound of shouts and blaster fire filled the air for a few brief moments before everything was silent. The smell of smoke and ozone started to fill the hallway.
"All clear,"
he heard from a filtered voice. Captain Fordo emerged from the smoke, spinning his blaster on his finger before replacing it deftly in its holster. Maximum firepower, maximum efficiency, thought Cram. Well, that just about wraps up this particular audio ride. Are you a fan of Star Wars or Star Trek? Are you a fan fiction writer or cosplayer, or have something else about your fandom that you are particularly proud of? Well, I'd love to hear from you, and maybe even have you as a guest on this podcast. You can email me at darkempireradio@aim.com, or just leave a comment for this episode on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. You can also join our forum at forum.hollowneaudio.com. Dark Empire Radio is a presentation of the HollowNet Audio Podcast Network. Visit us at hollownetaudio.com or look for HollowNet Audio on your favorite podcast platform. For even more discussion and Wars and Trek fun, check out and join our forum at forum.hollownetaudio.com. You can also listen to Dark Empire Radio directly at darkempireradio.com. This podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only and is not affiliated in any way with Star Wars or Star Trek or their respective property owners. All other original content on this podcast, unless otherwise indicated, belongs to HollowNet Audio. So there.